let's see if this is just a little bit better than it was yesterday or last week. Hopefully it is. I put a little work into making sure that the audio is solid, as well as some of the other problems that I was suffering from last week. So last week, if you don't know why I didn't do a news show, it's not that I didn't do a news show. I actually did do a news show. The audio and some other things just didn't work out for me, and so it wasn't very good. And honestly, under one of my learning experiences, I tried to set up this really cool little nook in my office. So this is just in a small corner of my office. And I also tried to stream it with a little bit nicer of a camera setup, but then really didn't realize the amount of things like my audio was desynchronized with my video and things like that. So, anyways, and I had a chipmunk voice for some reason. I don't actually know what caused that problem. I restarted my computer between now and then, and it's fixed. So restarting my computer, I guess, was the fix to that problem, but it is now something that I know to check for before I, do a video. All right, we'll give it just another second for people to join. How's everyone's week going? I hope well. Feel free to talk in the chat if there's anything that we are talking about that you either have experience with or wanted to bring up. As always, join the Discord. Those links will be in the description of the video as soon as this is over. Feel free to send me news articles that you see and think should be covered, and we'll make sure that they get covered. Now, I did want to note one thing to note, and I wanted to start with this, was earlier I had talked about Docker allowing you to skip a build, and I thought that was pretty cool, skip an install. And I got this annoying prompt on Docker for Windows that wanted me to either install it or pay for a Docker Pro account. So I think this was a horrible implementation, and Docker, or anybody from Docker, if you watch this or listen to this, please fix that. That's not acceptable. All right, so we're going to kind of do our regular scheduled. We're going to pretend last week didn't happen just for my morale. And then I'm going to talk about something I was planning on talking last week. And if you're not really big into open source or what defines open source or don't really care, then you can go ahead and skip that and it will be at the end. All right, I'm still working on this new setup, so I know that this text is a little off from the video, so please forgive me with that. I will be working on making this, but there were a bunch of new CVEs for your GPUs if you run NVIDIA GPUs, so as we like to do with security here. This actually affected both the hardware, so there were several CVEs up on the GPUs themselves, but also the vGPUs had 8 vulnerabilities. And so here are the CVEs. I'll be posting the links to all of these CVEs in the description of the video. But if their vGPUs is a way to basically allow you to break your GPUs up. So if you buy a consumer grade GPU, you can't actually do it. So that means one container gets one GPU, and that's what you're stuck with. But with their vGPUs, you can actually break that up, and that's something that you pay for. Anyways, there was 8 security vulnerabilities in that, so you're going to want to go ahead and update. And if you just have an NVIDIA GPU, make sure you're on the latest patches. All right, so this is something very interesting. If you guys know, I do generally cover Cloudflair stuff, and I generally like their stuff that they do. And here's another thing that I really like. Cloudflair is notorious for going after patent trolls. If you know, about 2 weeks ago, man, this is actually really not working well. 1 second. Let me see if I can't fix this. It's like a bunch of white space. Can we fix this? We're fixing this. Here we go. Less white space. All right, so I will get this fixed a little bit later on. But Cloudflare is notorious. Oh no, that's not actually even fixed. That's 1 second. This is not acceptable. I don't know what happened. 1 second, we're going to transition really quickly while I try to fix this really quickly. That 1 second. Anyways, I'll continue talking about it while I'm fixing this transition. Or transform. Sorry, I have a hard time reading words and saying something else. Anyways, Cloudflare is notorious about going after patent trolls, and this is generally a good thing. So they're kind of at it again. Person called Sable Networks is going after 10-year-old patents. Oh, I think that looks better. Let's try this. All right. So sorry about that. Like I said, this is a new setup. Hopefully it gets better. There's actually hardware that makes all of this live streaming a lot better, but it's all kind of expensive. And so I've kind of gotten it to work without it. Anyways, this is again, Sable Networks with some stuff. They did this again 4 years ago. You'd think people wouldn't go after Cloudflare after 4 years. Basically, Cloudflare calls upon the community to help them defend these patents and basically lay them as null and void. Basically, to do that, you have to show that something existed, common works existed before the patent was made. And so basically that's what Cloudflare is doing again. So if you're interested in that and want to look into these, Cloudflare is doing it again, taking it to these patent trolls. And this patent troll has basically filed lawsuits against a lot. And a lot of large companies actually just settle. And the sad part about it is settling for them is a lot of times a lot cheaper because fighting these things in court takes a lot of time and effort. So anyways, check that out. We won't stay too long on this. All right, as far as our cloud goes, I just wanted to, AWS released a Deep Racer, which is I'm not even really sure, but they open sourced it. It's basically a remote controlled car machine learning project, and they've open sourced it. And so if you're into that, robotics, basically with the AWS Deep Racer, go ahead and check it out. They open sourced it just recently. I found this, but wanted to talk about this later. We were talking about cloud stuff. All right. On cloud, we're talking about CNCF. I know that we've talked a lot about GitOps and those types of things. Oh, I'm glad it's much better, and sorry about last week. It was quite a disaster. I was quite embarrassed. I hold myself to a very high standard, even with things that I'm not particularly talented at. And so I kind of felt I had a rough week because of last week's stream. But I'm working on it, and the stream will get better each time, hopefully. And sometimes it will get really bad, but that's all I can do. Anyways, we talked about GitOps and continuous delivery things, and Argo CD is one that I talk about a lot because I have a lot of experience in it. Flux is another big one that's in it, and it has been accepted into the sandbox from sandbox to incubation, which basically means it's becoming a more stable project. So if GitOps is something that you guys are interested in, whatnot, Flux is definitely a project to be watching as it becomes more stable and used more throughout the CNCF. That being said, while we're on Kubernetes, this is a very exciting thing and something that I myself voted in. And this is the release cadence for Kubernetes. It used to be one release every 3 months or once a quarter, and that means 4 releases per year. I think that this is actually a huge deal right here because we can get into the specifics, but basically this is taking it down to 3 releases a year or once every 4 months. And why this is a big deal is because if you've ever updated Kubernetes, it's not a simple and easy deal. It's not straightforward, and it takes a lot of work. And what this caused was a lot of people to fall behind. and not update as soon and as fast as possible. This didn't just lock you out of features, but also possibly security, because the newest and greatest is in the latest security, and Kubernetes only supports 3 versions back. But this actually has larger implications, and I actually think Kubernetes will actually accelerate their programming. And the reason for this is code freeze and things like this, because it's such a large project, it spends like a month where there is no editing of the code before a release. I say there's several phases of it. There's code slush, where you shouldn't unless if it's a really big deal, and then there's code freeze, but you can still get critical bugs and things like that in. But for the most part, there's a large part of each release cycle that isn't done programming. And so those sections of time actually shouldn't really need to expand for the extra month, meaning each release will get an extra month and we'll spend less time doing these release processes, which take up a lot of the upstream's time. And I actually have some friends that work on the upstream, and I'm looking on the release team, and I'm looking to actually see if maybe I can get an interview and get some of their thoughts on this, because I know that there was some mixed feelings, though most of the community really supported this. I'm not sure that I can really follow this up with something better. This is actually one of the highlights of today. I'm really excited about it. I think it's really good for it. This was interesting at best. Basically, Facebook open sourced Flashlight, and I love seeing companies giving away and supporting open source communities, even though I myself don't use Facebook, and I think that it's really great that they are putting some stuff out like this. And if you guys look into Flashlight and think it looks really cool and think that I should do some videos on it, let me know. I don't have any plans currently, but it looks like a very cool project. It's written in C++, and yeah. Anyways, it looks like it's a pretty interesting project. I saw this. I thought it was interesting. It was part of AWS. Okay. I don't. Okay. Anyways, AWS launched a cloud-based production platform called Amazon Nimble Studio. I thought it was kind of funny because it seems like Amazon AWS launches something for everything, and so maybe my streams would be better if I used Amazon Nimble. Who knows? I probably won't. It probably costs money. All right, so here we go to the GitHub blog. I feel like it was like one a month where I would I would show you guys a GitHub blog, and I now feel like it's more like several times, one a week. So anyways, there's actually 2 this time because you missed one from last week, which was really important. And anyways, this is talking about how they use feature flags to ship code faster and safer. And it was a really good article on managing risk as a whole and how they did it with feature flags and let them not only release code faster, but safer, which I think everybody looks to do. Generally, when we say a faster release, we're talking about less overhead and more just deploying the code and getting it out there in front of our users, because the faster you can get it out there, the faster you can get feedback from them. So anyways, I suggest everybody read it. It's not a very long one, but it definitely goes into all the different details on testing and shipping strategies and how they managed them. All right, so here's another one. I couldn't tell if I had actually covered this or not, but basically Depenabot, which was in preview, is now not in preview and generally available. So go ahead, check it out. If you guys use Depenabot, let me know if you've used it and how you like it. And if you haven't used it, go ahead and check it out. It's basically, Depenabot is basically the de facto GitHub bot. Yeah, that's the easiest way to say it. And I don't know why this got split. Let's move it over. All right. This one probably should have been in the security, but if you haven't been watching, GitHub Actions have been abused to mine cryptocurrency. So this is an attack that's been launched by making a bad pull request that is designed to leverage your infrastructure to harvest cryptocurrency. And now the real problem is you only get so many minutes of runtime. And not only that, your agents could actually run on your own infrastructure, which is a real problem because that means it's actually using your infrastructure to mine cryptocurrency. And because of that, it's actually quite a big deal. And I really think that if you use GitHub Actions, you need to be reading this for two reasons. One, so that you protect your infrastructure, but not only that, you look at your minutes that you get to run. I think an open source project gets 2,000 minutes, which is plenty by most standards. But you need to be watching out for this if you use GitHub Actions, as it very well could hurt you, both financially as well as your internal servers. So I like and appreciate that they've released this so quickly. I think that you should check it out. They have a lot of stuff in here to how to protect yourself. So make sure you go out there and make sure you're doing best practices to protect your GitHub Actions. All right, this I found as a very fun article. I read the whole thing twice, and I'm not actually recommending it to you guys. I recommend reading it. I'm not saying that this is the correct path for everything. This company created drpc, which is basically a drop-in replacement for gRPC. Now, to be exact, it's not a binary compliant, which means you can't just drop it into a binary, but it basically slims down gRPC to just the base. Basically, they complain that gRPC had a lot of bloat and it has a lot of feature creep, which really is quite true if you look at the gRPC spec as well as the protobuffer spec. This is not hating on them. This is just merely stating this is what it is. And so for them, it actually made a lot of sense for them to, man, let me see if I can't make that a little bit bigger. Yeah, not that you guys are going to read it anyways, but it made a lot of sense for them to do drpc, which they actually only implemented it in 3,000 lines of code. Something I thought was quite amazing. I wouldn't have imagined that you could have made a base gRPC in 3,000 lines of code. Now, I'm sure that they're using protobuffers and things like this, so it's not the whole amount of code, but it's pretty awesome in its own. And basically, I think that it's a pretty good article to read for one factor only. And this factor is understanding why and when you use your dependencies. A lot of times you'd be like, oh yeah, gRPC is the de facto RPC implementation for servers, but not everything is right for your needs. And I always recommend people look for what's right for your needs. It's like Kubernetes. I think Kubernetes is great and it solves a problem. But if you don't have that problem, please don't use Kubernetes. All right, moving on. Oh, Facebook joined the Rust Foundation. I saw this and was very happy. Guys, if you don't know what Rust is the future of programming, pretty much. Everybody's getting on board. I am bringing you Rust videos as soon as I get the time to breathe and eat. I will bring you Rust videos. I very much want to. I've been learning it myself. I'm not very good at Rust at this moment. I do have a pull request into an open source project in Rust, and they were very gracious to treat me nicely because my Rust sucks. Actually, I think generally, I look at most of the code that I've written, and if it's not the code that I'm writing today, I think that yesterday code sucks. Pretty much always. And if it doesn't, it means I haven't learned something. Moving on, I don't use Azure a whole lot, and I don't use Azure's DevOps stuff, but they did release something that looks kind of interesting with their delivery plans 2.0, and these things look pretty interesting if I understand them properly with a timeline view of the plan, the progress of the work, and dependency tracking. Dependency tracking is huge. We have seen all this year with the security flaws. Understanding your dependencies, understanding how you get them, and all that thing is so important. And so dependency tracking is probably the biggest thing I would highlight in this thing. So it definitely looks like they're taking the current needs for DevOps and delivering on them. So this is pretty big. Oh, okay. I'm really excited. We're going to move on unless if anybody has anything to say about that. Again, please feel free to leave comments, concerns, questions in the chat. I will try to make sure I hit them whenever I can. Rocky Linux 3.8. That's wrong. 8.3 release candidate is available. If you don't know what Rocky Linux is the replacement and the spiritual successor to what many called, I called it CentOS. My boss calls it CentOS, which actually sounds cooler, but I'm pretty sure it's CentOS. And is the spiritual successor. If you don't know what happened, in January, Red Hat decided they didn't like people using CentOS, I guess. CentOS always tried to be binary compatible with Red Hat. And basically what they would do was they were enterprise Red Hat open source. So if you guys don't understand how Red Hat works and everything, we can get into this. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Run monoliths on Kubernetes because that will make your application automatically scale without pain, suffering, or sweat and tears and blood. Thank you. No, please, guys, enter the chat and throw out some shade whenever you see it, especially if it's about this channel. This is a time that I want to hang out with you guys and have, while I do want to talk about the news, I want to chat about it with you guys because I feel like, especially with open source news and a lot of that stuff, it's really about community, and that's what I'm doing here. So definitely feel free. Let me know if there's things that you want announced here or whatnot, especially if somebody from this channel is part of an open source project. Let me know when you're doing a release. Let me know about the project, and I'll make sure to give it a shout out and send you some GitHub stars. All right, back to Rocky Linux. Basically, CentOS was the downstream to Red Hat and provided a open source enterprise grade Linux distribution. And Red Hat, because it was on the board for CentOS, decided that it was done with that. And it is now the upstream, which means it's a rolling release and it's not suitable for your enterprise workloads anymore going forward. They shortened the support window and they did a lot of things like this that just aren't acceptable for an enterprise. And we could get into it, but basically, the team behind CentOS, the open source part that's not connected to Red Hat, and this is not me hating on Red Hat. Red Hat does what Red Hat does, and I actually have a lot of friends that I really respect working at Red Hat. What this is though, that it wasn't good for the open source community that supported CentOS, and because of this, they moved on to create Rocky, and Rocky is coming out this spring, and it's very exciting. So I will definitely let you know when Rocky 8.3 is finally released and probably do some video on it. All right, so I found this funny, probably is not really appropriate for this channel, but Google is redesigning its offices for the post-pandemic world. If The Verge is ever to believed or trusted, basically Google misses and they don't understand that the open floor place was the problem in the first place. And so they're wanting to make inflatable walls. I think if anybody can get me a picture of this, I would love to see it. They don't have any picture. I would love to see it. I know one of the people that watch this channel is from Google, one of my friends. So if you guys get inflatable walls, please send me a picture. I want to see that. Yep. All right. So let's go on to some open source projects that I saw. This is Age, and they gave a pronunciation guide like the Italian age. I don't know Italian, so it didn't really help me very much. I'm just going to pronounce it Age. I'm assuming it's not pronounced age, or else they wanted to give in the pronunciation. And I think there's a link that I could have clicked, but I didn't. Now, I'm not quite sure that there's any problem with PGP keys and encrypting things with that, and I think that that's a fantastic way, and that's how I do all of my secure file sharing, because you can share it with somebody that's a known entity, and it really gives you a lot of control over that. This makes it simpler though. So I think this brings it more to the common person, which is an interesting concept. That being said, it doesn't use PGP. It uses its own encryption. So I'm not sure how much I would entrust that, and I haven't actually dug too deep into it. But it does allow you to use the RSA algorithm, which then should be fine, as that is a trusted and known algorithm. So anyways, it's interesting and definitely looks interesting to use, because one of the features that it does is it quite freely lets you send a encrypted secure file to a GitHub user, which I thought was a really cool thing, because it's integrated with the GitHub API directly. So you can just basically, if you see a GitHub user, you can send them a secure file that only they can open. So I thought that was pretty cool. The other really cool thing about it is because their developers are cool. First, they made it in Go, and then they realized that it would be better as Rage in Rust. Now, Rage is awfully close to my open source math open source project, which is just a set of open source math things, but these people write better Rust code than me, so they're definitely better to check out their code if you're into that sort of thing. Oh man, and I'm sorry guys, I know this one's going on a bit longer, and this is because we have 2 weeks because I failed last week. This one has been going on for the last 2 weeks, and it's been something in the open source community I'm not sure that we have seen as to today. The University of Minnesota did 2 bad things. The very first thing is they tried to supply chain hack the Linux kernel, and they kind of succeeded. Basically, they found really easy commits, and they poisoned these commits by making bad commits that put security vulnerabilities into the Linux kernel. Now, the real bad thing that they did here is they didn't tell anyone. Usually when you do this type of security hacking, you get the sign off somebody high up in the Linux organization that knows what's happening, that can stop it when it succeeds or fails. But they didn't tell anyone. And so these poison commits were just launched out of the blue with security vulnerabilities. Now, this was caught the first time, and they were slapped on the wrist. What did they do? They did it again. This is the real problem, and what eventually got them banned is they tried it again and got caught again. And so if you're wondering why the University of Minnesota is banned from submitting code to the Linux kernel, it is because they tried to hack it twice. And a lot of people are like, why is this a big deal? Well, first, they didn't let anybody know. And that would kind of equate to if I came into your house, started stealing stuff. One second. I am building, this is a video because I'm building a little Stream Deck. It's going to be an open source Stream Deck just for you guys, so that this is easier for me. But it would be the exact same as if I came into your house, started stealing stuff, you caught me, and I was like, just testing your security system, and then left. I don't think anybody would accept that at all. So anyways, the University of Minnesota then apologized, but the Linux community has actually made mandates that they need to meet to be able to commit code back. And in their apology, they didn't make any of the things that were requested of them. So it's kind of fell on empty ears, and is definitely not the way to get into your hacking career, as well, not a good hacker career. All right. Sorry, I did find that really funny. Thought we should talk about it. That's been unrolling over the last 2 weeks in the Linux community. This is something that... Now, I've heard IBM's response. Now, this came out last week, and I wanted to bring it up. And I'm bringing it up still because, I want to make sure that IBM knows... Not that IBM cares about me, but I do want IBM to know that this isn't acceptable. Even if they did act outside of policy, which was their statement, but they didn't actually apologize. My problem was this. IBM didn't say, we do not believe this. They didn't say that. And that's what they needed to do. They needed to say, we do not agree with that and we do not support that. They didn't say that. They said that this employee acted outside of policy. That's all they stated. But basically, an IBM employee on their own time committed some code to an open source project and used their private or personal GitHub. And they got reprimanded as an IBM employee. You are not allowed to use your Gmail account to work as a hobby. You are an IBM employee 100% of the time. I don't even really care if they say you're not allowed to use your personal email as a hobby. That does actually cross the line because your personal email is a hobby by definition. Like they miss the whole point of a personal email. It's not a personal email if you're not using it for Facebook, which I would say is hobby. But the last statement is where it really crossed the line. You are an IBM employee 100% of the time. Now, again, IBM came out and said they support open source, and they really do. I mean, think Red Hat. Red Hat's huge, and they own Red Hat. And IBM generally does a very good job of supporting open source. They have some people that work in Kubernetes, and I really like those guys. I wouldn't say I'm friends with them, but I know them. They know me. Acquaintances. So I really do think IBM does, but I really wish they would have come out and refuted this, that an IBM is not an IBM employee 100% of the time. I think that crosses a line. All right, now you're all welcome to leave at this point, because at this point, the rest of the episode is going to be about... Actually, is the stream going okay? Because I'm getting a warning that the stream's current bitrate is lower than recommended. Yeah, it's a lifetime contract. I'm just not comfortable with this, and I wish that they had done a better job of saying this is not our commitment. You know, when you go to the bar, you're not representing IBM. And that brings me to a point that I fail to mention every single time, but I want to. I don't have to, but I want to. Everything on this channel is my own personal. I'm not paid by anybody to do it. I am not asked to do anything. This is because I want to. Anyways, I need to come up with like an intro that does that automatically for me. All right, so at this point, you're more than free to go if you want to, because we're going to be talking about Grafana. Now, I actually very well know some of the people that work here. I'm not going to drop names so they don't get in trouble. And actually, they don't have the same feelings that I do, so they shouldn't get in trouble anyways. But as you know, Grafana went with the AGPL and re-licensed. And I think I've said this before. Open source isn't a business model, and I think that many people have gotten this confused. Now, I think a lot of people are also confused as the difference between SSPL and the AGPL. And because of this, I am making a mini documentary. This is going to take me a while, so don't expect it anytime soon, but hopefully this fall, this mini documentary is going to be released. I'm going to be trying to interview a lot of really prominent people about it. And so yeah, if you guys are interested in that, let me know, because I'm going to be putting a lot of work into it. But it's because I feel very passionately about it. I do open source so people can use my code however they like. And if you can make money off of my code, more power to you. I would be thrilled if somebody came back and said, I made $1 million off of your code, Merrick. I would be like, sweet. Technically, some people might say my contributions to Kubernetes have made people money, and for that, I'm really glad. And take Kubernetes, for example. It's Apache 2. It's a great and thriving. The CNCF is a huge, thriving community, and that's one of the reasons is because of its Apache licensing. Most of the projects, or a lot of the projects in the CNCF are Apache. There are a few others. We could get into that. But they're Apache or MIT or the likes. And I feel very strongly about this because this actually allows other companies to get involved. Because of their licensing and because they're not controlled by a single company, you actually get a lot more people involved with a lot more money. And by money, I mean other companies pay developers to work on these open source projects, which make them better for everyone. Kubernetes is better for everyone because companies like Red Hat, IBM, Amazon has people that develop it, Microsoft, All of these companies pay people to work on the code base. All right. So, oh man, I should have transitioned. You guys didn't need to see me in small. I don't know that you guys need to see me in large either. But what I wanted to bring up here, just as kind of my quick synopsis of why I don't like the AGPL, because a lot of people will be like, well, the AGPL is certified by the Open Source Initiative, or the OSI. And you would be right, it is. But I actually find the AGPL is to be more restrictive than the SSPL. The SSPL is what companies like MongoDB and Elasticsearch. The SSPL, all it says is you cannot provide it as a service. Now, if I wanted to use MongoDB and provide dashboards as a service, I could do it, and it would be fine under the SSPL. I don't have to provide my dashboard as a service, even though it uses MongoDB in the backend. All I can't do under the SSPL is provide MongoDB as a service. Now, I don't necessarily like this license. I'm not defending it because I don't think it's open source, and I would agree with the OSI that it's not an open source license. But it's actually less restrictive than the AGPL. And Grafana's entire response to why they picked AGPL was, that's all I could find. And it wasn't very convincing. They said, we've looked at it for a while, and the time felt right. What does that even mean? When does the time feel right to make your code more restrictive and less accessible? And the only reason they didn't use the SSPL was because of negative community feedback. I would have preferred the SSPL, because I'll tell you here and why. While the SSPL is not great, it means that I can use it in my services and provide something as a service. If you release it as the AGPL, I cannot use your service, so I can't use Loki or Grafana and provide a database as a service, and without releasing my entire stack, which is mind-blowing, because if you run on something like Amazon, there is so much that is the entire stack, and the GPL is poorly written at best. It's very vague as to where things stop. I really wish people would stop using the GPL, because it really needs a rewrite from the very ground up. Another reason I don't like the AGPL, I'm just going to switch this over. I have stuff to show you, and I'm going to put those links in there, but I'm just going to talk about it for right now. Another reason I don't like the AGPL is because it's non-competing. That's all it is. It's a non-compete license, somewhat similarly to the SSPL. I consider them the exact same. The only problem with the AGPL is it's very open-ended. It says you can't use my things as a whole, not even if it's just dashboards. It doesn't matter. So if I want to provide chairs as a service, I don't even know what chairs are, but if I want to provide chairs as a service and I want to use Grafana for a dashboard, I can't without open sourcing my entire stack, which I can't even feasibly do. The other thing that makes me not really like it is Grafana themselves wouldn't use an AGPL in their Grafana dashboards as a service. It wouldn't be allowed because their Grafana dashboards as a service don't have all open source code. And so because of that, they wouldn't even be able to use it, except it's their project, so they can still use it. But it's not a fair license in the fact that it's limiting people to doing exactly what they're doing with their code. So I know that I'm poking a hornet's nest with this, because I know a lot of people probably sorely disagree with me. I am really sad that Grafana felt the need to do this, especially for the reasons that they did. I get that companies need to make money. I'm not undermining that. I'm not attacking them for that. Open source, though, isn't about making money. It's about a community. Now, you can sell support for money, but you don't sell open source code for money. And this is where I really wish that companies would stop using open source as a business model. If you look at a lot of the classic old school open source companies, their business model is support and other things, not the selling of their code. Anyways, I hope that I didn't bore you guys with that. I hope I don't get a billion thumbs down because of that. If you'd like to see that documentary, which I'm working on, your support would be great. If you would like to let me know, like and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you'd like to see that. It might actually help me get some of these interviews that I'm going to try to get. I will try to interview both sides of it. I've actually sent an email to Grafana because I'd like to interview them. Same with Crate.io, as they just went Apache for their entire stack, which I strongly support. Anyways, that's it. That was me trying to be as brief as possible with 2 weeks of news. And if I missed anything, I apologize. I hope you guys like the stream and how it looks now. And hopefully I will continue to make it better each day. And yeah, thank you. I hope that you guys all have a fantastic next week. And I look forward. Ooh, before you don't go. Oh, I already lost viewers, but it's fine. There won't be a lesson released tomorrow because I have 2 very exciting videos coming this week that I think you guys will be really interested to see. These videos have been consuming a lot of my time in the evenings, and I really got to do some collaborations that were quite fun in the open source realm. And so I won't be releasing my container video because I don't want to release 3 videos because I work very hard and I would like to spread them out a little bit. These 2 videos are getting released in coordination with KubeCon EU. And so anyways, if you could watch those and give those people that I interview your support, that would mean a lot to me and probably to them, as I'm really appreciating the time that they gave me. Anyways, have a fantastic rest of your week. Thank you for joining. Jubril, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You should do it phonetically at some point for me. And I will see you guys next week.